Do you want to see results as quickly as possible or for as long as possible? Or what if I told you you can do both? So I've already spoken about how program hopping and that sort of shiny object syndrome when it comes to training is one of the number one things I see that gets in the way of people's success long term. And I speak from experience here because I can tell you that when I started doing this, and I already spoke about this on a podcast, I was obsessed with trying to find the best possible program. Which, I mean, obviously you might know this already, but there's no such thing as a perfect program because there's so many factors that go into making a program successful. It really depends on what you're doing, how long you're doing it for, what the goals are. There's so many things that happen. So because I was obsessed with this, what ended up happening was I was trying out so many different things, so many different types of training, lengths of time, pairing exercises together, any programming strategy you can think of, anything that I can read, get my hands on, found on the internet, spoke about on mentorship calls. I tried everything. And often I would go into the same pattern of seeing progress slightly tipping up. And then all of a sudden I would hit a point where I just couldn't fucking do anything anymore. And I would drop back down. I'd burn out. My body would feel terrible. I'd be completely shot mentally. And I knew the pattern was coming after a certain point because then I would feel irritable. My sleep would be awful. I wouldn't be motivated to train anymore. And so that's kind of where I started recognizing these patterns. And there was a certain point when I was still doing Olympic weightlifting and competing where I realized that, all right, this is sort of enough. I need to figure out a better way to do this. The biggest struggle that I had was trying to find this happy middle ground between programs that got me very quick results, which was things that revolved around linear periodization, which we're going to speak about, and things that gave me longer-term results, where I wouldn't go up as fast, but I'd be able to see progress and pretty predictable gains, actually, over a longer period of time, like I mentioned, and that was through undulating periodization, which we'll also get to. But what I discovered, and I think that's really important for you, is that you don't really have to only choose one or the other. We can find ways to be able to pair these two systems together in order for you to see very rapid progress when you need it, but stop just short of the point where you're going to burn out and reach failure and need extra days to recover or have to take multiple weeks off of the gym. And then when we get to that, just before that point, we'll start to filter into that undulating periodization or find out where within that model we can add the linear stuff. So let me give you a little bit of an idea of what I mean by this, because if you're confused about the difference between linear and undulating, it's very simple. Linear periodization is exactly what it sounds like. It's in a straight line, you're going from point A to point B. And something that a lot of people already sort of do intuitively is, for example, like in strength training, you might start with higher reps and a lower load. So let's say we're doing 8 reps at 100 pounds. And what's going to happen is as you drop a rep week to week, you would also increase the weight. Or you can even do it day to day, but I digress. It depends really on you. But let's say on a weekly basis, you would do, 5 sets of 8 reps on a back squat on 1 week at 100 pounds. The next week at 7 reps, you would go to 105. The week after that, for 6 reps, you'd go to 110 or, 107 and a half, whatever it might be. But you see how as linearly, as the reps drop down, the load starts to go up. And realistically, like in my experience, I found that you can pretty effectively see consistent progress in this for about 12-ish weeks at a time, 16 if you're somewhat undertrained and you go a little bit slower. But that's still 3 or 4 months of pretty consistent progress going up. But what happens when you reach the top of that range? Could you go up indefinitely? Could you go up forever? Probably not, right? I mean, and if you can, you're either a freak of nature or on some great stuff, in which case, you can always send things my way. Don't do that. But when we get into the other side of it, an undulating periodization, and that just means sort of in waves, right? We undulate up and down. We can sort of do the same thing, but we need a longer period of time. And the reason we need that longer period of time is because we have to go through a phase where we sort of peak up a little bit and then come back down and then back up and back down. But what we're going to notice is that the trend should always stay up. And you can do this in a very macro way, basically taking a bird's eye view of your entire training year. And in each of those blocks, you can highlight a specific intensity level. This is a way that I learned it from Stéphane Cazot from Kilo Strength Society. They're a fantastic group, and he's an incredible trainer. He's an incredible coach, and he has an awesome education system. You guys should check them out. But the undulating periodization system, basically the way he likes to do it is one block, your first sort of cycle of that year might be in one intensity bracket. So let's call it the average intensity of that block might be 80%, right? So you're going to lift at about 80%, whatever the reps are going to be designated for you there for that block. And that block might even be 12 weeks at a time. You can change the reps and the sets around within that 12 weeks, but the average intensity should be about that 80%. And then as you get to the next block, you have two choices. You can either go down slightly in the intensity, or you can go up slightly in the intensity. It doesn't matter necessarily which one you do. It might matter depending on your goals. But the point is that if you go down after the 80%, and let's say your average then goes to 75%, well, what you want to do is in the cycle after that, you're going to go up higher than your first block. So you would then have in 3 mesocycles, or macrocycles, excuse me, you would have an 80% block, a 75% block, an 83 or 85% block, and then a little bit lower, 77 maybe. And we would start to see that these numbers trend upwards up until a certain point. Now, again, this doesn't mean that you'll be able to do this on a consistent rise forever, because you will need some deloads, and realistically, your goals are probably going to change slightly, or you're going to need to change up the style of the training because you're just going to become a bit too overstimulated, and then that training is not going to be as effective. But with undulating periodization, the cool thing about it is that you can actually find very effective workouts and very effective programs for a longer period of time than if you were doing the linear stuff. And the reason for that is that the linear stuff, because it's consistently about going up in intensity or going up in volume, but regardless of what it is, you're going up in one direction for an extended period of time, that becomes extremely stressful and extremely difficult to recover from. Whereas the undulating method, the cool thing about that is that every time you sort of peak up to a point where that volume or that intensity starts to get near that level that becomes difficult for you to recover from it, you then just automatically on the next cycle end up dropping it down, right? So if the intensity is going up, you decide to drop the intensity down, but raise the volume realistically, it's going to act as its own deload, right? And so you're going to be able to continue to train at a pretty good level because the average intensity will have dropped. Now, if you do the opposite, where the average intensity goes up on the next block, then the only thing you would do is drop the volume there, because that's what's going to make you require more recovery, right? Because you can't do both at the same time. So if you want to use this as more of a practical sense, let's say that if I was strength training with an athlete, the way I might look to do this and combine both of these methods to sort of see progress for a much longer period of time is I'll look to do both simultaneously. And I'll do wave loading, undulating periodization on a micro level. So that would be week to week, I would change it up. And then on the macro level though, we're sort of going still in this linear fashion because I'm going to be increasing the average intensity probably every, call it 7 weeks or so, because we're going to do waves. So I'm going to link down in the description an easy way for you to follow this. But essentially what you would be doing in this case is you would start, let's call it at again 8 reps, just because that's what we used before. You would do a certain number of sets, call it 4 sets of back squats, 8 reps at a given intensity. The next week, you would do that same movement, those same back squats. In this case, the sets stay the same. That rep would drop down to 7. The following week, same thing, that rep would drop down to 6. But now instead of continuing the linear progression, because we know that at a certain point, that's just going to become too much to recover from, we then restart that wave. And now we're going to go back up to 8, back down to 7, back down to 6. And then that 7th week, we would deload it. We would do a lower intensity, lower volume. And then when we go into the next set of waves, we would do the exact same progression, though this time we would start at 7 reps. So then that would go, where were we at? Week 7. So week 8 would be 7. Week 9 would be 6. Week 10 would be 5. And then we again continue that wave. Once we pass that 3-week mark, instead of continuing to go down, we come back up, 7, 6, 5. Deload, take a small break for 1 week. We go to the next wave, 6, 5, 4, 6, 5, 4, back to the next wave. And so as we do that, we could also change the level, the target level of intensity, basically the load that you're going to use if you're advanced enough to do that. Because what you're going to notice is that this is going to pick up very quickly. And so my suggestion here would be to start at a lower intensity. So basically, even if you're starting at the 8 reps, it'd probably be a good idea to leave a couple reps in the tank, or maybe use a weight that you can do for like 3 more reps than the 8. Because what you're going to notice is every time you do that wave, those intensity brackets will go up slightly, probably by about 2.5%. And then week to week, that's going to end up where you can take this essentially from week 1 at 8 reps to probably week 24 to really heavy singles and probably hit new PRs. And this is a method that I use really effectively with one of my clients, Victor, who we managed to take his squat in 2 years, 2 full cycles of this. Mind you, we weren't training full time. We were only training in his off season. We took his squat from 385 to 505. And I have those videos up on my Instagram, and you can see that. And his bench too, we took his bench to 355. We took his deadlift to 535. And those were all like mid 300 numbers. Actually, his bench was under, it was like 285 at the time. And we took it up this way because we took our time. We did our undulating periodization, but it was still linear enough that we had predictable increases every block. And in this case of the program, the block is really 6 weeks plus a deload at a time. But under normal circumstances with other programs, you wouldn't be able to go straight 24 weeks and see consistent progress. But in this case, we were able to. And now from something that's a bit more linear towards you, I would really love for a like and a share on this video if you found this tip helpful. And don't forget to check the link down below to see how you can incorporate this into your program. Until next time.